All right, so a couple bits of news I do think are important for the Cleveland Browns broke before I was able to, before this video is scheduled to go live, so I want to make sure it's covered. One, the James Hudson just signed a deal with the New York Giants, $12 million with another $4 in incentives, which is pretty expensive for James Hudson. Tells you that there's not a lot of faith in this tackle class, unfortunately. But because like a guy like James Hudson going for that much just because he's young is kind of crazy. What this looks like for the Cleveland Browns is a potential 6th-round comp, according to Jack Duffin, who's really good at this stuff. So make sure you go check out Jack if you're wondering how the money stuff and all of that will be mattering for the Cleveland Browns during this free agent period. Another thing the Browns did was sign a veteran tackle, Cornelius Lucas. This is somebody who has played in 129 regular season games in over 11 years with a bunch of different teams. He spent his last 5 years with the Washington Commanders. I believe he spot started a few games last year, 7 games last year for the Washington Commanders. So still a pretty good swing tackle backup guy. We knew that the Browns really needed to add somebody in this kind of lane because you have Jack Conklin at one of your tackle positions. He's not a sure bet to stay healthy. You have Dawand Jones at one of your tackle positions. He's not a sure bet to stay healthy. So you want to have a pretty solid swing tackle. So what happened to you last year does not happen to you this year with all of the injuries kind of hitting your tackle positions at the same time. Now this gives the Browns some flexibility, right? Jack Conklin on paper being your right tackle is not a problem. You just have to worry about him missing a couple games down the stretch. Lucas Cornelius is more than good to be able to do that. Dawand Jones, the hope is that he loses some weight. He gets healthy from his injuries. Losing some weight will help him stay healthy down the line and play better at left tackle. And if Dawand Jones can be as good as he was at right tackle at left tackle, but lighter, a little bit more athletic, then you really got something there with Dawand, and you have your left tackle of the future. So now you just have to have a swing guy. That is, I think, the hope. Worst case scenario, if Lucas has to step in, it's not the worst thing in the world. No matter what side you have to put him in, it's definitely a better situation than you were in last year. So good to have Lucas here. 2 years, $10 million deal with a lot of that being in incentives. My guess is it's probably a base salary of like $3.5 million spread over 2 years, with the rest being in incentives, which is not much money at all. So I think the money is good here. The deal is good here. I like that the Browns brought in a veteran tackle. That's my thoughts. Sorry I couldn't be on camera for this update, but it is 2:00 in the morning and I'm not dressed. So now I'm going to throw back to me and Brad Ward talking about the rest of what the Browns did in free agency. Y'all keep watching. Let's talk about some of the moves the Browns have made in free agency. First, start with like the stuff that just dropped as of recording this, which is 7:53 p.m. March 10th. Want to make sure everybody's clear on that. Dalvin Tomlinson, along with Juan Thornhill, those are your 2 post-June 1st cuts.
Yep.
There has been a rumor circulating, I don't know how substantial, about the Browns being interested in Javon Hargrave. How do you feel about losing him? It felt like this was on the this was on the table.
I didn't expect it, to be honest. Like I thought they are. The one area that they are lacking is like what he does. And I almost felt like they needed too much of like they need more of what he was able to do in the run game last year. So like, okay, if you're going to get rid of him and you get 2 guys that can do the same thing, that's fine. But I need to see that. You know what I mean? And I realize there's savings there. There's cash savings there, and there's cap savings there with the post-June 1st cut. But if you're going to get rid of Tomlinson, that's a guy that I could depend on for sure to be good enough on the offensive line. Like, you better replace him with 2 guys that can fill that role.
Yeah, I think Juwan Briggs factors into that conversation. I think they're probably going to bring in another body here. This is the year to get a new defensive tackle, though, if you want to, because this defensive tackle class is just as big as the running back class and the tight end class here. So tons of depth here. You can get somebody like Zeke Biggers in late round. You can get, CJ West is another guy you could throw into that conversation. There are a ton of guys you can have that talk about with replacing him. And then you have Mike Hall, who's coming back. So
Mike Hall is a 3-tech though, and even
yeah,
wider at times. Tomlinson could play the nose, whatever. If if you want him to play inside and just take up space on rundowns and get pass rush push on third down, he could do
yeah.
both, right? At the
I
same
think
time,
the problem is though they used him like a 3-tech most of the time, right? When
which
the
they
Browns
will
had him out
in this
there.
wide 9, yeah.
And I think what they've learned is that it's just, I think they were trying to like, okay, we'll have a guy who could be out there hybrid. We don't have to take him on and off the field. And I think what they learned is that it's just better to have that dedicated 1-tech to get whatever snaps there are. And I think that's what Jawan Briggs is here for. Or maybe you can draft like a Zeke Biggers or somebody to be that 0 or that 1. And then focus everything else on having like these 3-techs that can get downhill, which is clearly the desire of what Jim Schwartz wants to do. It's kind of similar to what Pittsburgh does, where Pittsburgh doesn't really run a nose out there more than like 12 to 15% of snaps in a season. And I think that's probably where the Browns are going to go, where like that nose position is technically a starting one, but it's not really a starting position.
Yeah. It'd be interesting what they do with that move. I'm not going to kill him for it right now. I hate to see him go because I was a fan, but I'm not going to kill him for it right now, and I'll wait and see how they handle that.
All right, we talked about the Kenny Pickett move already. Let's talk about something we kind of touched on this when we talked last time on things I think I know about the Myles Garrett contract, and we were having this conversation. I think me and Jack Duffin are the only people who are talking about the no trade clause scenario for the Cleveland Browns. They signed this contract with Myles. They get it done till 2030. What I thought was interesting was that this was an extension. Now, I thought they weren't going to be able to get an extension. I think it's important that it is an extension because that $40 million doesn't hit until 2027, a year for him. Which by the time we get to 2027, $40 million for Myles Garrett, probably going to seem closer to a deal than what it feels like now. And Myles is one of those players you don't really care. You don't really pocket watch about how much they make because they're worth it. But the 40 mil for him, right, if we're just looking down the line, Will Anderson's going to get a shot at the apple. He's probably going to reset the market. Hutch, right? Hutch is coming up soon. I think he's next in line, right? 2026 offseason. He's going to get his 5th year in extension.
What's his name in Dallas is next, I think.
Oh, Micah. Micah's going to, was that
Mike's
this is
next.
Yeah, that's this offseason, right?
Yeah.
So, and knowing Jerry Jones, he's probably going to make this worse by waiting.
He always waits.
Yeah.
He always waits and pays people more than he needs to. It's crazy.
Well, I think somebody referred to it as he always bought them airplane tickets 5 minutes before the plane departs.
Yep, exactly.
So, yeah, I think the price is going to go up. I think by the time you're at 27, you're probably looking at like 50 mil being the norm for an elite non-quarterback type player. And, quiet as cat, we said it. I think the Browns handled this quite well.
They did.
It's interesting people covering things that we usually applaud of organizations for doing as like a bad thing when the Browns do it, because people made a big deal about the whole Jimmy Haslam didn't let him talk to him. But hey, look, the news came out that Jimmy said no to a meeting. Next thing we know, we got a deal done. Yep. Seems like the right way to go about it.
They handled it. They couldn't have handled it better in this situation. Like, they don't get it all right all the time, Q, but they got this one right for sure.
We just spent like an hour complaining about the Kenny Pickett trade.
Yes, so they don't get them all right. But they got that one right for sure. And you know what? I heard people saying today, like, oh, yeah, so what? Like calling him a liar about saying it wasn't about the money. I don't think that's it. I think that I think he went into the trade request thinking like there's 2 ways this can play out. Hey, I can force my way onto a contender and get the contract, or I'll just get a bigger contract. And I think he saw the writing on the wall that, like, hey, they really aren't going to be able to move me because that shoots themselves in the foot, and Barry's not going to fire himself by trading me and sending them straight into a rebuild. So, and I think probably Clutch saw that and they said, okay, take the biggest contract, in history,
Well,
non-quarterback. So
it's been a constant saying, right, throughout this whole thing is that this is an NBA and Miles is operating as if this is the NBA. You can make a trade demand in the NBA. You can make a trade request in the NFL.
yeah,
Like it's a little bit different.
exactly.
And I think with Miles, he ran into the reality of it being a trade request, not a trade demand. And the Browns made it obvious that they weren't going to move on him. And anybody looking at this situation objectively knew that the Browns weren't going to move off of him, because you can argue this is what? Well, like Myles Garrett is definitely the best Brown since '99. As far as like if you're looking at somebody outside of like an offensive tackle position, it gets dicey when you try to compare Joe Thomas to him. But like as far as like profile combined with like level of play and like acclaim, this is the best player the Browns have had clearly since 1999. You can make the argument going back, Miles has eclipsed other guys who still have not made the Hall of Fame, or he's going to be an instant Hall of Famer in a way that like a lot of Browns legends, even going back to the 80s, are not. So, this is probably the most popular Brown you had on your roster combined with really good since Jim Brown. And you can't let that walk, right? Like not in his prime, not when he's still playing good. You can't let that walk for no reason. So yeah, they weren't going to do it. And look, I've seen Browns organizations do stuff like consider trading things like that, right? And fall into that trap. So I think this is a positive sign about the Browns front office. And I think the deal is ultimately a decent deal. It's expensive as hell, right? But it's for Myles Garrett. I don't mind spending a lot of money to keep Myles Garrett on the team, right? He's one of those players when we talk about like, oh, well, can you pay a wide receiver this much money? For Tyreek Hill, it's fine, right? Or for these players who initially get these crazy deals, it's fine.
Yeah.
If the problem is like, okay, 3 years down the line when like Alex Highsmith is trying to get this money, or Nate Herbig or somebody like this who's good, right? Or if Trey Hendrickson gets this money, which Trey's really good, is Trey going to be worth $45 million? No.
Right.
So I think that's where you run into issues with it. But I mean, I don't mind resetting them. Myles Garrett is 100% a reset the market worthy player. And you reset the market for Myles Garrett, no hesitation about it, right? Like how much money did it cost to keep Aaron Donald on your team? It doesn't matter.
Exactly.
you just pay it. And for the Browns to get that, an extension that keeps him in Cleveland until 2030, presumptively. Now, he does get that no trade clause, which I think that part's being missed upon the people who are like, Myles, did he even want to go? Because I'm like, no, you don't get the no trade clause if like you legitimately don't want control over your future, right? Like that's a huge part of this, and the compensation that he comes away with. But we'll see. We'll see. Now he has ammo if he actually wants to get traded next time. And the Browns have security with him on the roster. And look, all of this stuff that happened within a month. They got from now until August to fix everything else that might have been damaged because of whatever happened in this contract negotiation. So, yeah, I see that as a win. What other moves did the Browns make other than Kenny Pickett? Did anything else new happen? Somebody in chat tell me.
I don't think
Are we good?
I can check for sure. Hold on. Let me double check.
Every time I think I'm done with the day, something else breaks. Oh, do you think they're going to bring Chubb back? Because I've been hearing conflicting things.
I think they are. I think they are letting him. I think there's a 4-year veteran something deal exception. If it's under $3 million, they can pay him like the 3, and it only counts half towards the cap. Jack was talking about, and one of the qualifiers is that he goes on the open market first. I think they're trying to get him on that deal. Either way, I think they
kind of like a mid-level exemption.
Yep.
That's interesting because like the one thing I haven't heard anything about anybody reaching out to Nick Chubb today.
Yeah, me neither. I believe
So
they're bringing him back.
yeah, that'd be interesting to see if they do bring back Nick Chubb. Definitely more hope there today than there was 2 weeks ago. Well, 3 days ago when Mary Kay basically wrote the eulogy on him.
Yeah, that was a weird thing to do. I think they're just letting him test the cap, bringing him back. For me, it's like he will always have more value in a Browns uniform in a Browns locker room than he would any place else. So you should be willing to match any offer.
Yeah, I hope that my initial feelings about that were wrong and they do bring him back, because I think him being back, especially in an offseason like this, where you're going to have to navigate everything that you're going to have to navigate, potentially a new quarterback. Well, a new quarterback in here, the age is going to be predetermined. I think you want as many vets of Nick Chubb's caliber and respect, so that you can get here. So interestingly enough, but Brad, thank you.